Excellent. So as I stated, I'm Megan Phillips here with Jody Ambrose of the Train with Trust Project. And Train with Trust Project is a nonprofit organization. We are dedicated to making animal behavior knowledge and information accessible for everyone. And we are joined today with Dr. Sue Dyson, who has come up with the Ridden Horse Pain Ethogram, sometimes referred to as the Ridden Horse Performance Checklist. And we host two websites. We have trainwithtrustproject.org, where you can learn about us and our other projects, as well as 24horsebehaviors.org. And that is where we have all of the information that relates to the 24 behaviors of the ridden horse in pain, shifting the paradigm of how we see lameness film, as well as all of information, research articles, podcasts, all kinds of links and information there. As I stated, we are a nonprofit organization and we have provided many tools and support items for people to have for free. And we encourage you to go find those. Again, they're available for free, just as the film. And if you like the work that we're doing and you want to help us out, we appreciate any donation. No donation too large or too small. So, moving on to our topic of discussion today. We are going to be discussing how we can maintain optimal well-being and keep your horse happy and healthy during injury rehab. So that will be our main topic today. And sort of to get things started, talking a little bit about what is enrichment, what is this concept that we're talking about. So enrichment is a practice and a process that is very common in zoos all around the world. And in fact, it is a requirement of the majority of zoos. If they are accredited, they need to have really solid enrichment practices in place for every species under their care. One of the main premises of enrichment is that it provides opportunities for animals to express natural behavior, which is considered one of the core precepts of good well-being. And so enrichment can sometimes sound like it's just a little bit extra. And what we always like to point out that it's actually how we provide the very best quality of life for animals that are under human care. So we have a full discussion of enrichment and how you can implement equine enrichment in our history of talks that we've done with these Facebook Lives with Dr. Dyson. And so we can link to those in the comments when we're finished. And you can find those on our blog, on our website, on 24horsebehaviors.org, or you can find those on YouTube as well, following our YouTube channel. So with just that little background of enrichment information, we wanted to move along and talk about how enrichment can be really a valuable tool to be used during injury rehab or rehab from illness, perhaps with horses. So I want to turn over the discussion a little bit to Dr. Dyson and Jody and let you talk a little bit about traditional rehab and what that looks like.
Well, I think if we go back really to traditional rehab, it was Dr. Green. The horses were turned away for 6 months in a field, or perhaps a year. And then probably about 40 years ago, there was a change, a kind of reversal through 180 degrees, and horses were confined to box rest with controlled walking exercise, or just box rest alone. And I think that that is probably not a very good thing in many instances, because for many physiological reasons, joint mobility, the constant stretching of tendons and ligaments, mobility is important. A human athlete does not sit in a chair or lie in a bed. They are constantly mobilizing themselves and exercising to the level of discomfort that they can tolerate. So for me, I feel that there are very few situations when I would be advocating box rest completely or stall rest. I think it is perhaps indicated with a severe recent tendon or ligament injury. It's certainly indicated with a fracture. And when we're considering rehabilitation after surgery, it may be necessary to have a stall or box rest for about 10 to 14 days after surgery to allow skin incisions to heal. But beyond that time, I think it is really important that horses are mobilized and mobilized as much as possible. And that needs to be done in a way that is safe for the horse and safe for the handler. So it is wise to consider, if there is a horse which is somewhat exuberant, that it is restrained with a bridle rather than a head collar. And you have more than just a lead rope. You perhaps have a lunge rein, so that if the horse does move away from you suddenly, at least you have some chance of keeping hold of it. And it's important that you protect yourself. And that means having suitable footwear, not flip-flops, ideally not trainers, that you're wearing gloves. So if the horse does pull away from you, your hands are protected. And if the horse has any tendency to rear or strike, then you're wearing a helmet as well, because you are potentially in a vulnerable position. And the more the horse is accustomed to walking, the better. And for that reason, I would also be an advocate of small pen turnout, where the horse can be constantly moving around. So with water at one end and a food source at the opposite end of the pen, or small paddock, depending on what's available, such that the horse has to move about from place to place in order to get both food and water. And I think this is relatively easy to do in a situation where you have control over what the other horses in the barn are doing. It becomes more problematic and more challenging if you've got other horses being turned out and galloping around in sight of the horse that's on rehabilitation. And then you have to try and think outside the box in order that your horse is having its walking exercise in as quiet an environment as possible. Jodie, do you want to add some things?
Yeah, I'll give you my thoughts. I think the average horse owner really dreads the concept of layup and rehab. And I think that mostly stems from this idea that it's almost like the horse has like a battery that's charged at the first thing in the morning, it's fully charged and you have to deplete it throughout the day. And I think we're sort of conditioned to think that that gets depleted by either riding or being turned out and going crazy. And there's a lot of other aspects to that process. It's not like you have that battery full and then you have to drain it all by the end of the day. It's more like a spectrum of arousal. And I think that that physical and emotional energy are more intertwined than people tend to think. And you can deplete a lot of that, or I don't even want to say deplete, because it's not like you're trying to drain that battery. I think it's like you're trying to keep the horse engaged with its environment. When problems happen is because the horse gets bored and frustrated that they're not being allowed to express their natural behavior. We talk a lot about how movement is natural for horses, but the reason movement is natural for horses is because it serves a purpose. It serves multiple purposes. And if you're able to give your horse things to do that satisfy those needs without going crazy in a turnout or without being ridden, then you're able to keep them from reaching that threshold of being overstimulated and doing things that are going to injure themselves or injure someone else. So, for instance, hand walking doesn't have to be just straightforward walking from one point to another. you can incorporate different games. I have different games where I'll, um, as I'm walking the horse, I guess, do we have the video here? Yeah, so we'll show this video. It's just a really simple counting game where the horse learns sort of a pattern of walking and stopping, and it keeps them focused on what they're doing, and it keeps them engaged with you and with the environment, and it really cuts down a lot on the tendency that they might have to react to things around them. Very similar to walking a reactive dog on a leash, keeping their attention on you and reinforcing them for staying calm and staying with you.
It's a bit like training them in advance, in that people tend to not think about when they're turning out a horse that they need to continue to engage with the horse once they've let it go. They tend to kind of encourage the horse to gallop off. Whereas if you, on a regular training basis, engage with the horse such that you're talking to the horse and then perhaps offering it food as it's turned out, then you're setting a pattern that can be continued when you get to the unfortunate situation when you're in a rehabilitation situation.
Yes, and as we watch this video, and as Jody was describing, this exercise has multiple benefits because, and we'll come up with this theme time and again, during this period, you have an opportunity to work on things that always need to be worked on and that you never seem to have time to work on. So this is a great opportunity to just sort of be working on some great halt behavior as well.
Presumably these are low value treats.
Yeah, they're just like grass pellets. And this horse initially was like trying to hand walk him was like trying to fly a big kite. And then you see this big tarp in the background, which is a huge trigger for him. So we did a lot of just walking up and down around this area with using the counting as a way to keep him focused, and the countdown was a way for him to predict what was going to happen, and that's a big piece of it. Is you know, if you have a reactive horse, you want them to really feel confident that they know exactly what's going to happen, and it keeps them focused on something predictable, and makes them feel like there's control in the environment.
And stopping and stepping backwards can be quite useful from a physiotherapeutic point of view, because they are engaging different muscle groups and they are walking forwards, and it's all getting something different. So I think that can also be incorporated.
That's a great point. That's a great point. And I think this bucket game that we're talking about in here, I think we'll show that a little bit later, but there are a number of things, just as Dr. Dyson, you were just pointing out, moving backwards. There are so many things that can be worked on during this time, and working in this way provides the animal an opportunity to be learning new things and new concepts, and for you to be building relationship, which we'll talk about as another really important aspect of enrichment as well. So kind of moving on to the idea of enrichment, understanding how it can be well incorporated into a rehab program kind of understands or kind of requires a little bit of an understanding of what makes enrichment good in the first place, that it's more than just a toy box and more than just throwing in one toy that will be novel and interesting for a little while and then will not be enriching if it is not rotated or used in some other fashion or some other things. So some basic principles behind good enrichment, sort of a gold standard in the zoo world is, do we have goal-based enrichment? And we can have many goals for a single individual, can have general goals for a species. You can have one single goal that is the main thing you're trying to work on, or an overall set of goals. And often in the zoo world, of course, we're trying to elicit natural behavior. We're trying to make sure that we have good social interactions, all different kinds of things. But coming up with that goal in the case of a rehab situation, as Dr. Dyson was pointing out, depending on what it is that your horse has going on, maybe taking a few steps backwards would be one of the goals, and having that happen on a certain number of repetitions or whatever that you can work out with the veterinarian or with a physio. In general, good enrichment that is addressing stress, as well as addressing just sort of that mental well-being and mental stimulation. Good enrichment engages the senses, employs variety and novelty, provides mental stimulation, elicits appropriate physical activity. So in the case of rehab, we want to elicit the right kind of physical activity, and perhaps might inhibit the incorrect physical activity. There are some things that we can do for sort of setting that as a target of the enrichment. And then above all else, enrichment needs to be safe. So we'll talk about that a little bit here. In the zoo world, a person comes up with an item or a plan, whatever it may be, that will be an enriching experience or an enrichment item for the horse or the animal to engage with, and we submit it to supervisors, curators, veterinarians, as many people who can have different eyes and perspectives on how this could go wrong, so that we know that we're putting something in that has a very good likelihood to be safe. And even then, one of the main rules is to supervise that enrichment, that there's somebody with eyes on that, to really ensure that the animal is going to engage with it in a safe way, knowing what the risks are, and sort of preventing them whenever possible. Understanding your individual animal that you're working with is a big part of knowing whether this will be a safe item or not. And understanding the difference between stressing an animal too much with novelty, which can happen, especially animals like horses who are prey species, and providing too much all at once. There are ways that we can introduce enrichments or novel stimuli in a way that they can acclimate to it over time versus being exposed all at once. So these are things that keep in mind as we're looking at safety. One way that we commonly think about implementing enrichment in the zoo world, and applies directly to horses just as well, is looking at their range of experiences. And so considering all of their five senses, and we can rotate this on a day-by-day basis or during a particular session that you're engaging with the horse. If you're going to be there for 2 hours, have we covered all of the senses? There are many different ways you can look at this, but we sometimes forget about what the horse is experiencing and think all about what we're experiencing, what we want from the horse, and considering what they are experiencing is a really good way to look at enrichment. So this is a reflective surface that the horse can see his reflection in there. I don't know, Jody, if you want to talk about this a little bit. It is a video we can play, which is pretty
Yeah,
cute.
this is that's just a plastic wedding platter from the dollar store that happened to, be shiny. And this little guy obviously is a baby, and he had a companion that unfortunately passed away. So we did a lot of enrichment with him. He wasn't gelded until he was older, and so he couldn't go out in the field with all the other horses right away. And so we did a lot of enrichment, and he really liked to look at himself because he was adorable.
And Jody, if you want to take over talking about these, since you're with the horses there.
So this is a hula hoop that has beans inside it and streamers that make noise. And so it was a nice little noise maker. This is actually the same horse that was doing the walking and counting exercise. And we did teach him to pick things up first before we introduced the thing that made noise. And this was a really important one to supervise because he could tear those little streamers off of it. But he definitely liked to make noise with that. And it's a good example of how you can use sound enrichment in a way that gives the horse control. I think we have to keep in mind that their senses are often stronger than ours. And so you can do things like play music in the barn or voice recordings, sounds of other kinds of animals. But you want to make sure that you're not sort of bombarding them with 24/7 noise that is too loud for them or aversive to them. We have a friend who actually did what word am I trying to think? An experiment where she let the horses push buttons to choose different kinds of music and determine whether they preferred classical to country music. I think they preferred country music, if I remember correctly, but obviously that's a super elaborate example, but it's good to observe and see how they react to different kinds of sounds. I think we tend to fixate on enrichment that uses the sense of taste because there's usually an immediate interaction that's really obvious between the horse and the enrichment. Sound is going to be more subtle. You may or may not really notice anything right away, but they're very conscious of what's in their environment, and any change, anything that's novel, is going to have an impact on them. And so it's really good to introduce things and then observe and see, do they seem to be comfortable with it? Are there any differences in their behavior when it's happening versus when it isn't? And to mix it up and try different things, and it can make it kind of fun. I think a lot of people have seen the musicians that'll go out and just play for animals. I see a lot of that on social media. And sometimes you'll see an animal that really engages with the musician and comes right up to them and expresses an interest. And it's kind of fun to see, if you can find something like that your horse really is drawn to. Tactile is another one that people aren't really sure how to implement. There are certain horses that are like really itchy that will, if you put up a scratching post, they'll immediately start using it. Those are the horses that you definitely want to do a lot of tactile enrichment with. If you have a horse that you put up a scratching post and they completely ignore it, you can teach them. You can actually train them to engage with it and see if that helps. Or maybe that's just not a good sensation to them. Something like simple grooming or human scratching, they groom each other, finding the spot, like moving all over their body and finding the spot that they enjoy. And they can tell you through their body language what they enjoy and what they don't. There's other kinds of softer tactile stimulation, things that aren't super hard and scratchy. Some horses will like something really soft, like a soft bedding. You can really get very creative with it. It's just really good to remember that, they can't necessarily, they don't have a lot of control over their tactile experience when they're on box rest. So you can always provide something that's a little bit different and see if they take to it. Scent is a really fun one because they do tend to engage with things immediately. We don't always think about scent as a form of enrichment in the way that we do with like food toys, but horses are very scent centric and care a lot about how things smell. And in this picture, this pony has these buckets of water that each have a different scent in them. And again, they have a really strong sense of smell, so it doesn't take much at all to change the scent of something. And so I think this is something like 1 drop of like an essence, or I think in some cases it's like they have these products now that have sort of like alfalfa in them, or some kind of food smell. And so we were doing some preference testing here where she could smell all of them and let us know which ones she preferred. You can do that with all kinds of things. And you can put something in your horse's stall that's an unusual scent and just let them find it. Again, give them control over the process. If they don't like it, they'll stay away from it. If they're really into it, that gives you a lot of information about what else you can do. You can hide it so that they can seek it out. There's great coursework available now in doing scent enrichment, and even teaching horses to do scent, like search and rescue type work, where you can have them seek out a scent. We saw a great paper one time at a zoo conference where they were able to separate a herd of zebras out into individual spots by training each of them to a signature scent and then hanging each of those scents along the fence line. So each zebra would go to its own scent that it was trained to go to. So you can have a lot of fun with scent enrichment. There's just a whole lot of ways to incorporate it. And again, it's really important to realize that they have a really strong sense of smell and get a lot of neurological feedback from scent. And so it's important not to bombard them where they can't get away from it. You want them to have a choice and control over the process. And this is a similar exercise with taste. I think we had mango and apple sauce on a licking mat. Like I said, we do a lot of taste enrichment with horses. Nowadays, there's a lot of commercial toys that you can stuff with hay or with pellets, that kind of thing. This is a way that you can use a really small amount of a unique food and give them a choice between more than one thing. This licking mat is actually a food safe dish mat, I think from Amazon. So it sort of makes it so that they have to kind of lick at it to get the taste, but it's food safe and it's not sharp, so they're not going to injure their tongue on it or anything like that. These are great toys. You can also use ice, freezing things into ice. There's an infinite number of ways that you can incorporate taste. It's one of the easiest kinds of enrichment to do. And I think it is something that people do on layup, but they don't provide necessarily enough variety or novelty. It tends to be sort of the same food toy over and over again.
So, again, in a zoo situation, and applies for sure with horses as well. And as we looked at the different senses there, certainly with taste and smell, the concept of foraging, prolonging foraging is one of the predominant types of enrichment that we do, because it has to do with eliciting natural behavior, and particularly with horses, right? That we know that prolonging foraging is key because that's one of their main behaviors. And as Dr. Dyson kind of pointed out earlier in the talk, placing food and water on opposite sides to encourage movement between. We can place food and different enrichment items in different places to encourage movement or to sort of guide the type of behaviors we want to do. But always, of course, we have to consider how these things are influencing the animal's health. First of all, just making sure that they are safe foods. And so oftentimes using fresh herbs. I know we used parsley and basil and things for the rhinoceroses at the zoo, and they really seemed to engage with those different herbs in a different way, but making sure that what you have is safe, that you're offering the animal, and then see what their response is to that. And of course, calories are important to consider with a horse who's not getting the same amount of exercise as they usually would. And then browse is something that is also one of the primary tools that we use in the zoo world, which is basically trimmed tree branches. And usually, depending on your area, you can reach out to someone at the university, someone in the agricultural fields, sciences, to understand what will be safe browse to offer to horses. And Jody, I don't know if, or Dr. Dyson, I don't know if you have anything else to say about this idea here.
I
Yeah, I
just
wanted
think
to, oh, go ahead.
to bear in mind several things that we don't want to overfeed the horse, because we don't want them gaining body weight, because that's more load on limbs, which is contraindicated if you're rehabilitating from an injury. But at the same time, it's important that they are doing enough chewing so that they have enough saliva being produced, which is going down to be swallowed into the stomach, so that we can have the right acidity of the stomach to reduce the risk of gastric ulceration. So it's a fine balance between providing sufficient forage and not to excess so that they're gaining body weight. And so therefore we have to think carefully about providing, for example, boxes for them to pull hay out of, perhaps substituting some hay for straw so that it has reduced calorific value, and also making it a bit more challenging for the horse to eat. So, for example, using double hay nets with small holes so that it is more challenging to remove the hay from the hay net. But we also have to balance in mind in terms of what posture we want the horse to be in during rehabilitation, in that for most things, we want the horses to be stretching down with their head and neck rather than pulling against a fixed object against the wall.
Yeah, I would just add to that that you can use your horse's regular ration of food in lots of different ways. One of my favorite techniques is just to take their hay and spread it out over a wider area, so that they have to move around while they're eating. When I mentioned earlier that, that movement serves a purpose, and if they're not getting that need met, it doesn't matter um, how much food they're getting if they're not being allowed to seek it out and move to get to it. So you can just spread it out. Like Dr. Dyson just mentioned, you can use lots of different kinds of slow feeders. You can also, if you're mixing in lower calorie types of forage, you can give them small piles of each so that they can move around and find the higher value ones and then go back to the lower value ones. There's obviously lots of commercial kinds of slow feeders. You can build slow feeders. In this picture, I have some dried herbs that I added to this box. If you're going to add something new to their food, you want to make sure that they have a choice between the regular version and the new version in case they don't like the new version. But that sense of smell can make it more interesting, and can give them a little bit more mental stimulation when they're seeking the food in a different location. If they get in the habit of seeking out that particular scent, you can put it underneath things, or in containers or things like that they can search it out. That's the kind of natural behavior we're talking about, that they have a need for, that you want to make sure gets satisfied. And you don't need to increase the amount of calories in order to do that. Oh, you know what? I was going to say one thing real quick about the browse. We have a mulberry tree that the horses really like, and they will eat the leaves. Any leaf that they can reach, they will eat. And if a horse has a condition where they shouldn't be reaching up like that, we will cut branches down, make sure there's no sharp points, and then give them a whole branch. Or we might hang a branch in their stall, And then we also discovered that the leaves, when they dry out, are even more valuable to them. And so we will gather the dried leaves and put those like in a cardboard box with a hole in it and let them bang that around. We call those potato chips because they're crunchy and they all love their potato chips. And so we do a lot with that too. So it doesn't have to be, if they like, if you have a tree that's safe for them to eat and they like the taste of it, it doesn't have to necessarily mean that they're browsing off the tree. You can use that for a lot of different activities. Am I talking about this?
Jody, did you want to talk about novelty and variety? It's um
Yeah, we've mentioned it a couple of times. I think the sort of old school introduction that most people have to enrichment is, something like a ball that hangs in the stall. And I have an old compilation video that I made where I walked around and filmed every single toy at a large barn that I trained at. And I think I ended up counting like 60 different toys that were hanging. And when I walked around and took pictures, there wasn't a single one that a horse was interacting with at the time. And it's because they put these toys in the horse's stall and they become furniture. If they're there all the time, they really lose value. And so you want to make sure that not only do you use a variety of different things, and it doesn't have to be like here on this table, I have all kinds of fruits and vegetables and items that I picked up at the dollar store. I think there's a cat tunnel that I would stuff with hay. There's little water bottles that I would put beans in to make noise makers. There's all kinds of things I use for flavoring. There's a bunch of different variety there. You don't have to use all those things and rotate all of them. It's just good to have a rotation of maybe, 3 or 4 things so that it's not the same thing every single day. Even two that you rotate is better than just the same thing every day. Um, and then novelty, every once in a while, introducing something that they've never seen before. Not only is that stimulating for the horse to see something new, like this horse meeting a parrot, but it also it allows them to get used to new things being positive. So if you have a horse that spooks at anything that's new or out of place around the arena, by introducing novel objects and creating a positive association with those novel objects, it actually gets them better at coping with novelty. It's something that they should be good at because, again, they're meant to travel and move over large spaces and see different things and taste different things. And we tend to sort of make their environment very uniform. They get fed the same thing at the same time every day, and everything smells the same, and they have the same neighbors, and they see the same people. And novelty is a very healthy way of potentially introducing even a little bit of stress, but at a very low level that they can learn to cope with. And that's how they build their coping mechanisms. So it can be super useful as a training tool and also good for them psychologically and emotionally to have that experience.
and I think it goes back to this idea of reframing this period of rehabilitation into what an amazing opportunity it is to build desirable experiences for your horse, but also for them to learn things that will benefit them and you throughout all of your interactions, whether it's riding after they are back to work or ground manners, anything like that. Such a great opportunity, and that exposure and learning how to safely explore and have positive experiences with novelty is a great example of that. Um, Choice and control, we've talked about a few times throughout this presentation already, and is something that is first and foremost in our minds much of the time as we work with zoo animals is how can we allow these animals who are so very capable of existing in their native environments all on their own to have some of the empowered lifestyle for all of their skills that they naturally have, and having choice about how they want to do things, what they want to engage with, how long they want to engage with it, and what way they want to engage with it, and have some control over what their experiences it is in the world, um, as well as having an effect on the item that they're working with. Some animals want to take up and pick up and shake something. Some animals want to scoot it along the ground. And so allowing them those opportunities for choice and control is just a very important, and it sort of satisfies that mental stimulation part of things when they to express these natural skills that they have as they engage with things.
And I'll add to that that choice and control also includes choice not to engage. And I don't see it so much anymore, but when I was younger, I used to see a common practice of if a horse was scared of something, people would hang it in their stall until they basically learned to ignore it. And that harkens back to what Megan mentioned earlier about flooding um, versus counter conditioning. You don't want to overwhelm them with something, so they should have the choice to disengage from something or keep distance from something and approach it at their own speed. And even, having it on one side of their paddock when they don't have the ability to leave the paddock can be overwhelming for some horses, depending on what the item is and what the horse's emotional state is. So make sure that you're not sort of forcing them into engaging with something that is stressful for them, where they can't get a break from it.
I think that also goes to the great potential that enrichment has for relationship building, which the more you observe your horse and see their preferences and say, oh, that was too much, I'm going to back off with that. All of that is so enhancing to your relationship. So,
Yeah, I think that's so important because, as I said earlier, I think the average horse person really dreads having to do a rehab layup. And I have seen some really inspiring things happen with some people that go through a period where they're unable to ride their horse, because it really does force you to find, I think a lot of us got into horses because we want to ride, but most of us got into horses because we love horses. And in some ways it can sort of force you to find that part of yourself that just wants to be with your horse and just wants your horse to know and trust you and be interested in you. And it's a fantastic opportunity to build that. And it will pay off dividends when you do get back to riding, because that carries over to your relationship in the saddle.
Yeah, so even just turning the horse and teaching the horse how to yield properly. There's so much that can be done as groundwork that many of the Western trainers use as part of their groundwork before they ever start riding a horse, which is not done so much in the sports horse world. But there really is a place for it, I think, in terms of the horse learning how to move its body and how to use different muscle groups. So I would see this to be used beneficially. And also, just for example, having poles on the ground, and not regularly spaced poles on the ground, but irregularly spaced. So the horse is having to engage, think for itself, because this is low load exercise, which is not going to produce any harm to the horse, but is mentally stimulating and also developing their proprioceptive functions, which is a win-win situation.
Absolutely. I use a lot of Jack Ballou's exercises. There's a lot of physio exercises that you can find that are great to spend time doing. And again, they can help with the rehab process, but they also help with that relationship building. It really teaches you how to how your horse learns and what things are difficult for your horse. And I think that's something that has improved a lot in the horse world, as people are finding, that they don't have to just get on and ride. There's liberty work, and there's the all kinds of groundwork like the Tristan Tucker stuff. And there's so many options now that you can spend time doing with your horse. And I think balancing that with making sure that your horse's needs to express their natural behavior is getting met, or are getting met, that you want to make sure that you're not only focused on the things that involve you telling the horse what to do.
We talked a little bit about using it as an opportunity for perhaps for spooking, and this is just a quick video of this horse that Boj, if you want to talk about that, well, or out, my nickname for Jody is Boj. So Jody, if you want to talk about this video while it's rolling.
I mentioned earlier that this giant tarp is a major trigger for this horse. A lot of the time it's very windy at this barn, and the tarp isn't tied down at the bottom, so it blows around. And so we just taught him to walk up and touch it at his own pace. Notice she's standing behind him a little bit. So he's approaching it within his own comfort level, and getting reinforced for targeting it. And target training is great for that kind of thing. Any reactive things that a horse is reactive to or afraid of, if you can allow them to approach it at their own pace and then eventually reach out and touch it, it becomes I remember hearing somebody say, a horse has been clicker trained when they will try to target a chicken, because something that is novel and maybe a little scary or intimidating, they learn that it's an opportunity to move towards it rather than to run away. And that's a really important skill set for a prey animal that has a tendency to, when they don't understand something and it might be risky, they leave the area. So you can definitely use hand walking as an opportunity to play targeting games and walk up and target anything that they're unsure of. And again, it's just really important to give them control over that. You're not forcing them towards it. You're allowing them to get space when they need it. Socialization is a really important piece of this, which I think is maybe one of the more complex pieces. Separation anxiety during layup is a really common issue, and it's a very tricky thing to work through. I think there are ways you can be creative in creating opportunity for social interaction that is safe, that's not going to set back your rehab process. Interaction through barriers is a big part of it. This picture is one that sort of is a good one to talk about, because these kinds of pipe corrals are not always the best for horses on layup, because it's pretty easy for them to get a foot through or get tangled if they're really desperate to get to other horses and they've been starved from social interaction. So it's really important to evaluate your barriers and make sure that you make them safe. But interaction through barriers is not the only kind of social interaction that you can provide. You can also, human interaction is social interaction. You can do mutual grooming with your horse. You can just doing all these training exercises and interactive enrichment exercises is social interaction. As far as horse interactions, you can use sight, scent, sound. There's, providing them some of the elements of being with other horses that they're missing out on without actually being in immediate proximity with them. Sue, do you want to talk about separation anxiety and social interaction?
I don't think I've got much more to add, really. I do think it's a vitally important part that they do have sight and touch of other horses. But you have to remember that not all horses like each other. So to put a horse next to it that the horse doesn't like is not a good thing, because it's going to avoid that horse. So it is important that you are cognizant of how the horse that's undergoing rehab interacts with the horse next door, if it's in a positive way or a negative way.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I've done a lot of, is I think about the concept of parallel play, which is, a human development concept where kids will, at a certain age, will play next to each other without playing with each other. And I think that's a very useful concept with horses that you can, if you can feed them within sight of each other. Eating together is definitely a common social interaction. And if they are completely separated and don't get that feeling that they're of communal eating, that can definitely stress them out. So, and it has the added benefit of if you're feeding on opposite sides of a barrier, um, it allows them time to spend together where they're interacting, but they're not directly interacting. You can do that with enrichment toys where you give each of them a toy to interact with at the same time. So they're sort of doing the same activity together. You can also swap scents. So taking the poop or pee from one and putting it in the other stall and vice versa, or even like their saddle pad that has their sweat on it or their blanket, anything that smells like them, just swapping it out so that they get the experience of smelling. Even if they don't like the horse, it's going to be enriching for them to be able to smell that horse. Um, and then in terms of separation anxiety, again, it's one of the harder things to deal with, but strategy is important. You can make sure that when you have to remove one horse, you're rotating in another horse. Or if you can separate them by like within sight of each other and increase the distance gradually over multiple days, until eventually it's, waiting until they're okay with each distance until you increase it a little by little. That's going to be better than taking the horse completely away and allowing the horse to just stay behind and stress out. And then, assuming it's okay when you bring the horse back, that will build. Usually that will cause the anxiety to increase over time. So, um, it's difficult in boarding situations where you don't always have control over the other horses, but with a little bit of creativity and strategy, which is part of what we do as consultants, is that we help build that strategy of how to deal with these kind of situations over time to make sure that the horse is able to acclimate to that stress.
The same thing applies though if you're a two-horse owner and one horse is on rehab and the other horse you want to continue to ride, because then you're going to be taking its mate away, and that becomes more challenging to work around. So
Yeah.
again,
Well, that's a great situation to use enrichment, to give them an outlet during the time that the other horse is gone. And you can actually create a positive association with the other horse leaving, because if they get a really high value food enrichment when the other horse leaves, and obviously sometimes they're so stressed that they won't eat, but you can again work towards finding something that is high value enough that, and keep the separations short enough at first that they can learn that it's actually a positive, a net positive for them when the other horse is leaving.
So, Dr. Dyson, you had a lot to say on this here, so I wanted to sort of hand this over to you about, because using this time proactively to help rehab that injury, maintain muscle, things like this, were some things that you had talked about being a great, again, another opportunity that can enrichment can help with.
Yeah, I think that it's really important that we have to consider that different injuries are going to require different levels of physical activity. But as a general premise, we want the whole horse's body to be mobile but stable. And we therefore need to be working lots of different muscle groups. And we don't need to be doing the same thing every day. We can be rotating through a series of different exercises throughout a week. So you could just start by saying, well, I want to encourage the horse to use its stabilizing muscles as much as possible. So I can just grab the withers and I can rock the horse backwards and forwards. I can go to the front, to the chest of the horse and rock the horse backwards several times. I can pick up a front leg and push the horse away from me. So I'm creating the use of the stabilizing muscles in the opposite forelimb. And these are all relatively simple things that one can do. Likewise, baited stretch exercises, carrot stretch exercises. So bending the horse's neck so that the head and neck are going towards the hock region, for example, is good for the multifidus muscles, which are really important back stabilizing muscles. So you can be using this rehabilitation time to protect what muscle function the horse had and potentially to increase muscle function that was perhaps lacking before. Because you can do these things in a different way to ridden exercise. And a good resource is that Gillian Higgins has written a book, Pilates for Horses, which has lots and lots of different exercises. And it's made very clear how to do them. There's a video that goes with it. And also there's an indication of for what different injuries each exercise has a potential use. So you don't have to be overwhelmed by an entire book on exercises. You can pick out a few that might be useful for each individual horse. And obviously, we're going to be thinking that as the rehabilitation progresses, we're going to be progressively increasing the amount of exercise. And I always say with walking exercise that if the horse is difficult to lead in hand, depending on the type of injury, some horses are much better if they are ridden at the walk. And now there are going to be some injuries for when it's going to be contraindicated to be riding the horse at the walk. But for many, the weight of the rider is immaterial in terms of the overall scheme of things if the horse is safer in that situation. So we've always got to be thinking about what is going to be most suitable for each individual horse. And also bear in mind, as I said before, the safety of the handler or the rider. This is not a time because we're just walking to be walking with one hand on a lead rope or one hand on the rein and a mobile phone in the other, attempting to scroll through. That's a very unsafe situation. You want to be using this as a positive experience for how you are interacting with the horse.
Yeah, this picture is an example of that because this was a horse on a very long layup and, it was very difficult to keep him focused, that there's a pasture behind him with horses running around. And she had taught him to push that ball around on the ground. And so she just incorporated that into her riding and just fortunately had the arena to herself and would have him push the ball around while she tack walked him, and it kept him focused and entertained and made it much more fun for both of them. She also did, excuse me, she would place targets around the arena and ride him from target to target.
And I think we also have to think about if, for example, your horse is undergoing elective surgery, say, for example, it's got a hind limb suspensory ligament injury and it's going to have neurectomy and fasciotomy. There generally is a short delay between the decision to go for surgery and when the surgery is going to happen. So you can take that opportunity to see how the horse is going to accommodate, for example, to being long-reined or long-reined in a bungee or an equiame or a Pessoa training aid, so that you've accustomed the horse to this procedure before it actually undergoes the surgery and has then had 2 weeks box rest and is then going to start walking exercise. So taking that time before the horse undergoes surgery to figure out how it's going to manage the horse afterwards can be time well spent.
Yeah, for that matter, doing the same with a healthy horse is a good idea.
Indeed. What a great opportunity their layup period could be for you and your horse. I wanted to just sort of jump back because Dr. Dyson, you were kind of hitting on where recommendations come from for doing these exercises. And one of the things that we've talked about in the past too is having really strong communication between the vet, the physio, the tack fitter, the rider, between everybody who's involved with everything having to do with the horse, that we're all on the same team. We're on team your horse. And having that knowledge of what is going to be needed during all of this, coming up with a plan is always part of any good enrichment program. And obviously if we sort of consider our rehab period an enrichment plan / rehab plan, what are going to be the phases? What is going to be needed? What tools, what equipment, what things? And as you mentioned, in situations where you can plan ahead based on those things, that's great. And then also in situations can come up where you're not able to plan ahead. Taking this information about enrichment, again, we've got another full conversation about this that you can find on our YouTube, or we also do workshops and things about this. Working all of this stuff into your daily interactions ahead of time so that you end up with a horse that can cope with lots of things is also a great way for enrichment to come into play.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that the veterinary profession is not very good at giving rehabilitation advice in general.
Yeah,
There
that's true.
tends to be box rest and controlled walking exercise without the thought of that, how they're going to control the horse. And they may just give advice about, well, we could sedate with X, Y, or Z in order to facilitate the hand walking. And I do think, therefore, it's good to make use of other paraprofessionals, such as a physiotherapist who has specific training in rehabilitation. So I would reiterate what has been said about using a team approach to help you. And don't be afraid to ask advice from a variety of different people.
Yeah. So, Dr. Dyson, I think that sort of wraps up our discussion about incorporating enrichment into rehab. And you have this great class coming up. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
This is going to be very much a practical course with a number of different horses of variable soundness state, with and without their riders. We're going to have a small interactive group of around 25 people, 25 delegates. So there'll be plenty of interactive discussion with encouragement from me for everybody to participate and give opinions and share knowledge about conformation, posture, how we see horses move in hand, on the lunge, and ridden, and recognizing gait dysfunctions, not just the overt lameness, but a horse which is, for example, struggling a bit with canter on one rein. And then also going back through practical application of the Ridden Horse Performance checklists in ridden horses. So I think it's going to be a unique opportunity for 2 days of interactive discussion and debate.
Sounds amazing. Where is this going to be?
It's going to be in Leicestershire in the UK.
Okay.
Great. And we can provide a link to this, but you can also go to Horses Inside Out website. They're a great partner with the Trans Trust Project and with Dr. Dyson, and they have a lot of content on there that will be helpful, but you can find out about this practical course as well, which sounds 100% just engaging, and this is what really will help people be able to really do this process of using the ethogram and then also engaging with others about it. This sounds just fabulous.
It does. I wish it was going to be live streamed. That was
Maybe another time.
yeah. In the future.
So again, just to wrap up, we want to thank everybody for joining us. Thank you, Dr. Dyson, for joining us on this conversation. We've worked together on a couple of these synergistic ways that we see things and how we can benefit horses. So we appreciate your insights. And if you all have any questions, be sure to pop them down in the comments. I've been taking a look as I can, and I appreciate the comments in there about your appreciation of the subject matter. So we're excited to hear about that. But we will engage with those comments since we've all stayed on screen for this one. We'll engage with those, and we'll try to put some links in there as well, so you can find some of the things that we've been talking about during our discussion. And we appreciate you all for being here. And again, you can find free resources on 24horsebehaviors.org. Make sure you don't miss out on those. And we'll look forward to seeing everybody when we talk again. Thanks so much.